gathered here today to talk about a very taboo topic in Pakistan, but a topic that's very close to our hearts and very often hushed, menstrual health. So first of all, thank you to WOW and to British Council for organizing this. My name is Amna Latif and I manage communications at Ahang. Ahang is an NGO based in Karachi, Pakistan, and it has been in existence for over 27 years now. Ahang works to promote sexual and reproductive health in Pakistan, and that may sound like a big fat word, but basically it envisions a Pakistan where every individual is able to exercise agency, autonomy, consent, and is comfortable with their bodies. Today we have here three very illustrious guests, and I'll quickly jump to their intros. Sabah Khalid is an award-winning social entrepreneur, public speaker, activist, and journalist from Karachi. She's the founder of Aurat Raj, a women empowerment, education, and entertainment platform that uses digital technologies. She is behind its key product, Raji, a chatbot that educates girls on taboo topics pertaining to health, safety, and hygiene, such as menstruation, pregnancy, STDs, and consent. Aisha Amin is the founder of Baithak, Challenging Taboos, a non-profit organization that works for gender justice, especially women's access to their sexual and reproductive health and rights in Pakistan. Baithak has educated over 2,400 girls and women in menstrual hygiene management. Last year, Baithak organized the first ever menstruathon in Pakistan that educated 1,000 young girls and their mothers in 8 days in 8 cities of Sindh. Tanzila Khan is a Pakistani disability rights activist, author, motivational speaker, and founder of Girly Things PK, a mobile application which delivers sanitary napkins to women with disabilities. I heartily welcome all of you. Sabah, I'll quickly jump to the first question, and there's basically two questions here. Where did the idea for Aurat Raj come from? And then where did the idea for Raji come from? And given the gender divide, as far as the digital landscape is concerned, how did you see this working?
Okay, starting off with the most difficult question and with me. So I'll start off with the origin story. I started off in 2016. I was deeply frustrated with the content that was being produced in Pakistan. I always felt that it was pitting women against each other. It was always about things that were quite negative. And at that time, a particular murder that happened, an honor killing, really set back the movement. It really exposed something about the social conditions of Pakistan, what we thought about women, who were bold or who, let's say, believed in their bodily rights, or had different choices than, let's say, the traditional Pakistani mindset. It was the honor killing of Kandil Baloch, and it was really tough to see the comments on social media. And I used to think that, there has to be something that should be done. There should be positive content. There should be empowering content. And I didn't know what to do. And I think Aurat Raj was at that time just something like a blog that I put together. And it was inspired by a film at that time that I had seen. It was a very old Pakistani film about, traditional roles being like totally like, let's say, reversed. And I was really inspired by that film. And I was surprised that in the 60s, somebody had really thought of that concept. And it was called Aurat Raj. So that's where I began, let's say, innovating and thinking about what solutions could be there. However, from that time on to today, we've done like various different, I would say, programs and initiatives and innovations. And each one of them has been like, you go in the field and you realize there's a challenge and you have to kind of pivot or change your approach. Like when we were working with our chatbot, we realized that it doesn't work in rural areas. It absolutely, like there's no infrastructure, there were so many limitations that product absolutely failed there. And so we had to come up with different ways to reach rural areas. When we reached rural areas, we thought, okay, education is not enough. We also need to have products. And so we started building our products. So, it's always been like realizing that whatever you're building, of course, leaves somebody behind. There's someone who's always left behind, and trying to kind of get them into the inclusion circle. With Raji, I think it was conversations with girls that I had in a lot of low-income urban settlements and their stories, and overall realizing that, how do we keep that conversation going? Like, I was building this content, there was cartoons and there was blogs and everything. However, I wanted to keep that conversation going, and the only way for me to kind of think about that was to create like a chatbot where there could be a two-way conversation. I learned a lot from that experiment as well. However, it's just been, I think one learning for me has been that you continue to innovate, you continue to pivot, you continue to kind of bring people into that inclusion circle.
Great. So basically it was, you knew your audience before the product came. So, you had your thorough market there.
I actually didn't. I used to go, I used to pilot, I used to see, I used to get a lot of testing and evaluation and sometimes really bad feedback, which gave me some push to change my product. At the same time, I think I was very lucky to also get a lot of people to just push for whatever I was doing. Like, it could be the worst product, but there were people who were just like, keep trying, keep trying. People like Tanzila, Amne, feminist organizations really supported the work. So yeah.
Wow, amazing. Tanzila, another toughie for you. Overcoming hurdles, not becoming a victim of your circumstances. There's still so many things that we can learn from you. But if I were to ask you one thing, what is that one thing that will make a huge difference to the life of a differently abled girl in Pakistan that is pertaining to SRHR? I mean, if I were to be able to grant one wish, what would that be?
Oh God, this is a tough one, of course.
Because no one prepared us for these questions.
Yes,
I was too excited. You guys are like too, I really wanted to ask you these.
I mean, these are such mind-triggering questions because they could never be one thing. I'll be very honest. They will always be a long list because there is so much. इतना कुछ है जो अभी हमें करना है और नहीं हो रहा. अभी recently, since you spoke about it, मेरी एक दोस्त है अनम, उन्होंने एक फिल्म बनाई है about this disabled girl जो कि married है और वो pregnant है और उसको pregnancy related थोड़े से मसाइल पेश हो रहे हैं और वो डॉक्टर के पास जाती है. तो जो डॉक्टर्स हैं हमारे मुल्क में वो अनफॉर्चुनेटली उस तरह से सेंसिटाइज नहीं है. सबसे पहले तो वो कहते हैं क्या आप मैरिड हैं, आप प्रेग्नेंट हो गई हैं, आप कैसे हो गई हैं प्रेग्नेंट, आपके बच्चा चाहती हैं, इस तरह के सवालात. और फिर जहाँ पे देखा जाए एक नजरिए से एक डिसेबल लड़की का प्रेग्नेंट होना कोई बहुत बड़ी बात नहीं है, लेकिन अगर एक और नजरिए से देखें तो बहुत बड़ी बात है. तो हम लोगों ने इन दोनों नजरिए के बीच में रहकर अपनी बातचीत करनी है और देखना है कि किस डायरेक्शन में हम जाएं. और वो जो फिल्म है वो दिखाती है कि किस तरह से हमारे जो हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम है वो ही इतना बायस्ड है. उनकी लैंग्वेज, उनको पता ही नहीं है कि एक लड़की जिसकी कोई ना कोई माजूरी है उसके रिप्रोडक्टिव हेल्थ राइट्स क्या हैं, और अगर वो आपकी क्लिनिक तक पहुंच गई है, आप तक पहुंच गई है, वो ही एक बहुत बड़ी एक तो मूवमेंट रही है. लेकिन जब आप तक पहुंच गई है तो फिर आपकी जिम्मेदारी बनती है कि उसको आगे उसकी हेल्थ की जर्नी पे सेफली लेकर जाया जाए. तो आमना, बहुत मुश्किलों से अगर मैं आपके सवाल का जवाब दूं तो मैं ये कहना चाहूंगी कि मैं और सबा, आयशा, हम लोग एडवोकेसी, एक्टिविज्म ये सब कुछ कर रहे हैं, लेकिन जो हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम है, हम लोग हेल्थ प्रोफेशनल्स नहीं हैं. हम चाहेंगे कि एटलीस्ट जो हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल्स हैं वो अपना काम प्रॉपरली करें, तो हमें ज्यादा ताकत मिलेगी कि हम अपनी मूवमेंट को आगे ले जा सकें. तो ये एक विश है जो इमीडिएटली मेरे ज़हन में आई है, लेकिन मैं कसम खा के कह सकती हूँ कि ये एक विश नहीं है, बहुत सारी ऐसी ख्वाहिशात हैं जो मैं चाहूंगी कि
I just hope that they'll all one day reach fruition. Thank you, Tanzila. Coming to you, Aisha. Aisha, there are so many questions I want to ask you, but the first and foremost is when, it's about accessing communities. Now, I'm a person in Karachi, and I would like to reach 500 girls in a district in Sindh. What are those steps that I need to take when I'm talking about tricky topics like, menstruation? And what are the risks involved? Like, what are the steps that I need to take? I mean, so many of us have trouble, when we're thinking of our programs, SRHR wise, communities may access karna or gatekeepers dhundna. Like, how did you go about that? So, yeah.
Thank you, Amna. That's a brilliant question. I can share some of the strategies that we use at Betak while accessing those communities. Most of the work we do is in the rural Sindh with communities, that lack access to health infrastructure, that lack access to education. As you mentioned that SRHR is a very taboo topic. आप जाके आप मतलब word sexual भी आप use नहीं कर सकते हैं काफी. And not only in these communities, right? A lot of times हम अपने proposals भी edit करते हैं to remove the word sexual because we know that
of course, yeah,
potentially create a barrier in even if you're sending it to an organization. So using this word itself is such a taboo. And then, for example, menstrual hygiene management, right? Periods word use नहीं आप communities में देखेंगे तो वो कोई code word use करते हैं, वो loves जो है माहवारी या periods भी बड़ा openly नहीं बात करते हैं. So it's very tricky accessing communities, and it's extremely important to identify your social capital, people who you can trust and people who the community could trust as well. So हमारी जितनी भी interventions हैं, we go through lady health workers, we go through teachers, we go through community workers. So identifying that support system on ground is extremely important. And I would also say it's a learning process. I think when we started in 2018, we did not know how to go about it. We just started doing it and we started learning, okay, what's the right way to do it? So I think Sabha was also mentioning she had to prototype, she had a product, she went in the community, it did not work out. And till day, with every session, we learned something new. It's important to be open-minded when you go into these communities and understand. So for example, health perspective, unko bahut samajh aata hai. So, we'll try to speak from the health perspective. Okay, how is this affecting health? Finding some sort of shared value is also important, right? So that, for example, that emotion of fear, of isolation, of stigma that young girls go through when they get their first period, right? Us emotion se unki mothers bhi relate karti hain. Us emotion se, I'm sure like I could relate to it, because despite growing up in a different setting and having access to different infrastructure, it is the same emotion, it's the same shame, stigma, isolation that I faced and a lot of my friends in university, in school faced, right? So finding that common value, shared value of, because when we talk about menstruation or other areas of reproductive health, we really talk about safety of young girls, we talk about safety of women. So finding that is important. Speaking the language, for example, छोटी चीजें जैसे हर community में हम जाते हैं तो वो कोई इसको कपड़ा कहती हैं periods को, कोई माहवारी कहती हैं, कोई code word use करती हैं, कोई महीनों use करते हैं, right? Understanding that community first before you can, and maybe being open to make changes to your approach, especially when you're talking about social taboos, is extremely important.
इससे एक और सवाल it just came to mind, but I'm going to circle back to you. Sabha, so basically Raji is now, I mean, it's out there, it's with some schools you mentioned. Going forward, how are you planning to scale it up, and how are you going to be able to measure its impact? Because, I mean, given again the fact that girls have much less access to mobile technologies, to any kind of internet, Wi-Fi, smartphones, the gender divide is very high there. So how would you be able to measure impact, or to be able to assess the success of your program? So the product itself.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back a little bit and talk about Raji being more than just a chatbot. So I'm going to talk about Raji as a whole idea that we started that is all about menstrual awareness, menstrual access, menstrual affordability. It's larger than just one product. And then when it comes to communities that are left behind, or communities that have great gender digital divide, or they're discriminated against, we kind of customize our solutions for them. Aisha was speaking about rural communities. Rural communities often don't have digital literacy. They don't have the infrastructure. A chatbot in itself, even with the best knowledge, and is still not something that they can understand. And localization of that content is very difficult. So for that, we had to come up with different ways that we could adapt. Exactly what Aisha said. The chatbot in itself, last year, we created an audio version of that content. And then we recruited champions within rural Sindh to take that content that was received through WhatsApp, and then they would launch listening parties or peered parties. And this was a concept that became really, really popular. And this year, we're scaling our menstrual champions to 100 all across Pakistan. And the reason why they were so, let's say, motivated was because we really spent time educating them about various aspects of reproductive health. We also motivated them through digital literacy programs. We gave them data plans. We gave them technology starter toolkits. And then we pushed that content forward. And then we did not have to do anything after that. After giving them all the capacity building, they went into their own communities. They started those peer parties. They shared that audio content, and they sent us pictures of their initiatives. So for us, scaling became really easy because, building a capacity of other people helped us scale our product. They all speak about Raji. They all know what the chatbot is, but the version of the product that they take is very different from the one that we created for urban communities. I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah, period party sounds a lot of fun. Like, honestly, it's yeah, once we at Ahang, we were sitting around the lunch table, and so many of us started talking about our first period stories, and being considering ourselves a very urban audience with sort of as per the definition of the word empowered, we thought we were very empowered, but we were talking about how we describe SRHR at home, and we even our parents, our in-laws, so many of them have these very vague concepts of the work we do. And a lot of us just say, oh, it's prevention of child sexual abuse because that's the easiest sell, and that's the something that everybody understands and empathizes with. And our first period stories, so many of us had absolutely no idea, with elder sisters, with mothers. When we first got our periods, we were like, oh my God, I'm dying. So a lot of them are funny, but a lot of them are really sad because it's such a shock. It's such a puberty. Something so simple and beautiful is just considered such a big blot of shame in our part of the world. Tanzila, you spoke about advocacy and activism, and we spoke about girls' reproductive health and rights. And I just wanted to ask you, are we shy of making bold demands as a country where Aisha spoke about, health outcomes? We speak largely about the impact on her health instead of her agency and her autonomy. I mean, if men were to have periods, we would have perhaps, mountains of sanitary napkins, in every office, in every, space, in every physical space. And, perhaps abortions would be, available at petrol stations, So, with the rampant misogyny, with so much, working against us, the brown bagging and the shame and the stigma and all of that, are we setting the bar too low by just talking about the health outcomes? It's her right to menstrual health and hygiene only limited to the fact that, give her the access to the bathroom so that she can attend school, right? So when do we talk about agency autonomy? Should we be talking about it? Is this the right time? Or should we just take baby steps and, work towards that bigger, bolder discussion later?
Amna, this actually takes me to exactly the point when I decided to start girly things. And it actually started from the idea of pizza. जैसे पिज्जा अगर हम ऑर्डर करें तो वो 40 मिनट में हमें मिल जाता है. उनका क्लेम होता है 2-3 मिनट ऊपर नीचे हो सकते हैं. एंड इफ आई कैलकुलेट, आई थिंक 20 मिनट वो लगाते होंगे उसको बनाने में. because आपको fresh भेजते हैं और 20 मिनट they must calculate कि आपको deliver हो जाता है. And that made me think कि अगर ये पिज्जा डिलीवर हो जाता है 40 मिनट में, तो एक अर्जेंट मेंस्ट्रुअल किट क्यों नहीं डिलीवर हो सकती? उसको तो पकाने की भी जरूरत नहीं है, ठीक है ना, वो तो बस पड़ी हुई है, ठीक है. लेकिन उससे कितना फर्क पड़ेगा वो हम सोच भी नहीं सकते हैं. उस टाइम पे मैंने इस चीज को बड़ा अंडर एस्टिमेट किया. बट फास्ट फॉरवर्ड टू दिस पॉइंट, इवन व्हेन आई एम नॉट इन द कंट्री, आई एम अब्रॉड and my team is handling girly things back at home, we realize the importance of this literally few moments. I mean, वो बस एक लम्हा होता है that the period has started and this menstruator can see कि बस it would affect her, it would traumatize her. I think for the longest time usko traumatize karta rahega, and then it all goes so deep inside the self esteem, the confidence, the loathing of the body, क्योंकि वो availability facilities की नहीं थी. So who failed who? Did the system fail the user? The user failed the system कि feedback timely नहीं दे रहा, या बोल नहीं रहा, मांग नहीं रहा, the bar is high, the bar is low. It's an ocean out there, and I have jumped into it, and I don't know how to swim, but I'm still in there, and I'm not getting out, because either maybe I don't have a choice, because now I can't unsee things, I can't unhear what I've heard from investors being so misogynist towards when I put my demands, extremely business related demands in front, made complete sense, lucrative offers, and I can't unsee the horrors of what women go through when they start their period, and the rushing around and that shameful feeling of asking for a sanitary napkin as if, God forbid, you're asking for drugs. My question would be, who are we? Are we talking about men and women and trans people alike, or are we just talking about women? You see, female menstruators, they have a lot on their plate already. There are a lot of challenges. And in this journey, I've realized that men are not the problem, really. I mean, every time I've tried to push forward an agenda, I did find men to be our allies as well. In terms of our IT team, for instance, we could not find IT staff to build the app. जो girly things की app बनानी थी, website बनानी थी, हमको staff नहीं मिल रहा था, तो लड़के on board आए और उन्होंने जिस तरह की हमें support दी, मैं थोड़ा सा surprise होगी. इतने sensitive, इतने sensitized, always asking the right questions, and then they became our ambassadors. I think they took forward the word. So slowly I realized the error is in the lack of the belief कि it's taboo. So I think हमें उसको जरा break करना है, क्योंकि if you look at it, it's not that taboo. Like, men know women bleed. ऐसा नहीं है कि उनको पता नहीं है, उनको पता है, ठीक है, उनको बहुत कुछ पता है. And the whole idea that women would not speak up believing it's taboo, मैंने तो बोलना ही नहीं है, तो फिर taboo किसने बनाया? Like, अगर मैं बैठ के बोल दूं कि आइसक्रीम taboo है आज, तो फिर मैं तो गई ना, सारी जिंदगी में आइसक्रीम नहीं खा सकूंगी. So मुझे लगता है all this journey, by the end of the day, मुझे लगता है कि हमें उसको taboo बुलाना ही छोड़ देना चाहिए. Let's just talk about it. Before starting a sentence, if I say periods are taboo and here I'm to talk about it, then I'm the problem. But if I just go on and say, okay, I bleed, I need a sanitary napkin, oh, remove the brown bag, just give it to me, thank you very much, problem solved. Okay, so we need to start the conversation in such a confident, acceptable manner कि उसको taboo अब हमको अपने brain से खुद को unbrainwash करना है. I don't even know if that's a term, but I think that's what we need to do. All genders alike. We need menstruators, female menstruators to do that. We need men to do that. We need authorities to do that. And we need to have a conversation that's just discussing an issue and not really something that is, oh my God, look at us, we're crusaders to be talking about something like that. I think we're not. We're just like people who are addressing issues in the society. So this is what I feel, and this is the conclusion I've come to, and this is the philosophy I think I'll be taking forward.
First, look within. It needs to be an introspective journey first. I mean, how much are we contributing to the stigma itself? Aisha, now coming to another domain which kind of is very, very closely linked to women and SRHR. How far are we from more sustainable menstrual health products, reusable cloth pads or menstrual cups? Do you think rural communities can skip a step and go from cloth to eco-friendly options, skipping sanitary napkins altogether? Or and will this make our work easier?
That's actually a very, very important question, Amna. Let me share like a few insights and perspectives into it that we've learned through our work. Firstly, a lot of communities that we work with, they can't even afford the disposable sanitary napkins because they're expensive, right? And we know that sanitary pads are not even considered an item of necessity, right? And so there are so many factors that play into it. A lot of women are secondary earners, so they're not financially independent, right? So they even don't get to make the choice of whether they want to get a sanitary pad, right? Bringing that conversation up is difficult in a lot of families because of what Tanzila was saying, that, you know, we have made this a taboo topic, right? So women are reluctant to speak about it themselves. It's difficult to have conversations around men. It's even difficult, I've seen, like, it's even difficult for women to talk to each other about it, right? So we have made it such a taboo topic. So they can't afford it, right? A lot of places, even if they have the affordability, accessibility is also an issue, right? Because going to a store asking for a sanitary pad is like how Tanzila was saying, कि अच्छा, आपने जैसे drug मांग लिया, right? So there are so many challenges and so many factors that come into play. And this is, I do think that it's important that menstruators have information about each product, right? About disposable sanitary napkins, about reusable cloth pads, about menstrual cups, about tampons, and they have the agency and resources to make an informed choice, which unfortunately does not happen, right? Because एक तो हमारे पास sanitary napkins भी हैं, you know, I just strongly feel this was like a promotional way of, you know, these enterprises making sanitary napkins, saying कि अच्छा अब आप कपड़ा use नहीं करें, it's unhygienic, right? अब आप sanitary napkin use करें. Now we are here where we are saying नहीं, sanitary जो disposable sanitary napkins है, they're not healthy, they are not safe, etc, blah blah blah, right? So we see that there's a lack of information and agency to make that informed choices. If I see the communities, and not only, I'm not even talking about rural communities, but, you know, even communities that have access, that have affordability, menstrual cups and tampons, it look like that, you know, it will take some time for us to reach there, right? Because there's a lot of, they're not culturally accepted products. So abhi isme bahut advocacy ka kaam hai. But I do feel that cloth sanitary pads are something that make sense in terms of affordability, because, you know, they long lasted. They are safer than a lot of other products, right? They're also culturally acceptable products because, you know, anytime when we talk about tampons and about menstrual cups, there's so many other myths about virginity and everything. So that's an additional barrier. But then we also have to think that access to water, you know, that's also an issue, right? There are a lot of the access to wash facilities have become an issue in a lot of areas, right? So we really need right infrastructure, but it is right of every woman to have that information, to have resources, and to have agency to make that informed choice.
Great. I agree. Matlab, you know, I mean, this is something that, you know, I'm specifically asking you for rural communities, but there's so much, you know, so many issues in urban communities and organizations that are very, you know, seemingly for the empowerment of women and girls. And there's hardly a female washroom on a specific floor of an office, for example. More than 60% of Pakistan's population is below the age of 30, and that's like a significant youth bulge. This young population is taught that the body is, you know, equal to shame, and, you know, puberty kya hai, kuch nahi pata, access to information, services, blah, blah, blah. You know, you see a girl in a gynecologist's office and you're like, oh my God, what is she doing here? You know, it's just like, unless you're not pregnant, unless you don't have maternal health issues, you just can't be seen in a, you know, so all of those cultural again, sorry, Tanzila, I'm going to talk about taboos, but these exist. And, these young girls don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the, and it can't be a shotgun approach to dealing with this issue. It has to be long-term, it has to be systemic change. But what are those few things now, thinking about a 12-year-old girl who's just got her period? What are some of the things, looking back, if I could tell my former self, if you could all tell your former selves, what are the steps that you can take to end period shaming? Oh, isko to mood swings ho rahe hain, and it must be her time of month, or the very, very sexist comments, and they take girls by surprise because they're not all used to knowing how to deal with them, right?
I want to respond to that question, but I also want to listen to what Sabah and Tanzila have to say, because they've been sharing some great things. So Amna, we do this exercise in our बैठक. जब हम menstrual hygiene management पे बैठक करते हैं, तो हम ये इनके साथ exercise करवाते हैं, because we have young girls and their mothers, their grandmothers in the same sitting. और हम उनसे पूछते हैं कि अच्छा, remember the day when you got your first period? What was it like? What did you go through? What did you think, right? What was happening to your body? Or पहले तो बड़ा बहुत ही the nervous smiles and everything, and then we share our story, and then they start sharing. And interestingly, the grandmother more or less has similar story. Mother has more or less similar story. And the younger girl, who is maybe 13, 14, has a similar story, which means that the taboo, unfortunately, has been carried over from generation to generation. And then we tell them, ab aap yaad kare, aapko agar koi, if someone had told you that it's a normal process and that you're not alone, there isn't anything wrong with body. Because I remember that when I got my period, I thought that I had blood cancer and I'm going to die, right? Or there's something shameful about my body. And then I was told after 3 days, when my mother found out eventually, because I did not share it with her, because I was like, what do I do, right? Because as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, you see blood coming out of your body, no one has told you, you just are traumatized. And so after 3 days, when my mother found out, she told me, now you don't have, ab kisi ko batana nahi hai. You have to keep it a secret. So I was like, I am sure this is something shameful, or there's something wrong and I'm not supposed to talk, because now my mother is telling me not to tell it to anyone. So ऐसी बहुत stories जब हमने काम start किया था, तो सामने आई थी, a lot of stories came, and we tell them, okay, if someone had told you that this is a normal process, right, and it happens to everyone, do you think you would have maybe felt more confident about your bodies? Maybe would you think that you wouldn't have gone through trauma or stress, or you would have done well at school, or everything? And they're like, yes. And then we tell them, okay, so now it's your responsibility to tell your daughters before they get their period.
Yeah.
If because you don't want them to go through it. So I think just telling, if someone told me it's a normal process like breathing, eating, I don't think I would have gone through that stress and trauma.
But Aisha, these mothers and grandmothers went through this and then they found out, but yet they did not equip their daughters with that information. That's surprising, right? Why do you think that's the case?
So interestingly, that's a very interesting observation. But the thing is, self-reflection is also a luxury that not everyone has it, right? You go through certain experiences, you don't get to self-reflect, especially women, because they're burdened with, so much. Ab to financial responsibilities bhi agar aap kafi rural communities mein dekhenge, you will see women taking financial responsibility of families, right? Then, and it's not only rural communities, the communities, it's becoming like everywhere. So it's a luxury, I would say. So in these spaces, they at least get to self-reflect.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something if on the same question. दो चीजें, एक तो मेरा अपना experience जो might be a little bit different in terms of like I had access to sanitary napkins, थोड़ी बहुत information मुझे मिल गई थी, तो I wasn't that traumatized. But what I didn't know, and now at the age of 38, I can reflect, is that I had, for the first I would say the first 3 years, I had extreme depression at a certain point of my cycle. And wo kafi had tak manage karna mujhe nahi aaya until my late 20s. And people who already suffer from some sort of like mental health condition, PMDD for them is a lifetime problem. So to this day, now that perimenopause ki taraf ja rahi hu main, I feel like those symptoms are coming again and they're aggravated. So PMDD comes back. You have to exercise. You have to keep symptoms at bay. You have to monitor your overall mental health at different aspects of the month. So you know, कि इस वक्त मुझसे काम नहीं होगा. I am gonna start crashing. I can't burden myself too much. So I feel like if I could go back and tell my 12-year-old self that not just prepare in terms of the product, prepare yourself mentally for the battle that you will have to deal with on a lifetime basis.
Sabha, thank you for saying that. By the way, I'm a co-PMDD sufferer. So after my second child, for 2 years, I was dysfunctional, like completely. So, and most of the month. So you're so right that all of these things really do help, but they're still so beyond the control, and there's so much, that we need to learn about premenstrual dysphoric disorder and related disorders. Thank you for putting it out there, honestly.
One last thing, I want to talk about the rural girls. Unko 12-year-old ke upar kya bataya jata hai? So the moment that a girl returns from school, let's assume, and tells her mother that she has started her period, immediately she's told to change the way that she dresses, where she goes out, and the fact that they're starting to look for a potential rishta or a marriage. So it's an immediate psychological shift in how people treat you, how you dress. So I want to go to 12-year-olds and tell them that, everyone might be telling you that you have matured, but you really haven't. Psychologically, you're still a child. Please treat yourself as a child, play as you would. There's nothing that you need to but unfortunately, the families tell them an entirely different story. A lot of times girls hide their periods, their mothers or their grandmothers will tell them, don't tell anyone in your family that you've started your period, because it sets off this whole array of planning for the future for the girl. And all of those choices of being a child, they're completely stampeded upon. So I would definitely want girls to just stay as they are when they're 12. And of course, the PMDD stuff is something nobody prepares you. You only know when you are in the center of it.
Yeah, and a lot of research. But and it's the fact that puberty is an evolutionary process, and it's like mental and physical and emotional and everything. It's not just a one-time thing. It can take up to a decade. So live your life and enjoy your childhood and be a child for as long as you would want to be. Tanzila, please, if you want to add something.
Yes, and I think Aisha and Sabah have covered exactly what was on my mind. And just to quickly add the tail of it would be the emotional health as well. Because PMS at times triggers a lot of hormonal changes. Sabah mentioned about mental health as well. Aisha also talked about how the world looks at you and how you start responding back. For me, my PMS is mostly about my emotional health. I think I get really emotional. And when I did not know, as a 12-year-old, I'm crying, I'm fighting, I'm shouting. So I was seen as like a crazy child. So I think at that time, I would like to go back और मैं अपने आप को बताना चाहूँगी कि ये hormonal changes हैं इस time पे कुछ आपको अपने आप को इतना seriously लेने की जरूरत नहीं है. You need to take a break, in fact. So just like what Sabha mentioned कि you should understand कि आपके hormonal changes किस time of the month क्या कर रहे हैं ताकि उसके हिसाब से you can plan your calendar. You exactly know कि अच्छा अब मुझे binge watching करनी है, binge eating करनी है, and this is leadership. This is a concept that we like to use at Girly Things as well. हम menstrual leadership trainings देते हैं कि you should know कि आपके कौन से months हैं जब आपकी leadership peak पे होगी. So आप वो मुश्किल task जो cognitive ability को enhance करें वो आप तब रखें. और जो आपके easy task हैं, you want to watch some season, you want to read a book, you want to go have a heart-to-heart with someone, you plan it at a different time of the month. So that if you want to cry, cry good. If you want to work, work good. और luckily as female menstruators हमें पता है कि हमारे hormones क्या करते हैं. मुझे नहीं पता what happens with the men, but जितनी information आज available है उसको disseminate करना मेरा सबा आयशा हमारा काम है. Information is available. I think a lot of people have done their work. तो हम creative way में उस information को हमारे users तक पहुंचा रहे हैं. And I'd also like to add जब मुझे period शुरू हुए थे तो मुझे बहुत clearly पता था about what it is. In fact, I was the girl जो जाके सबको बताती थी, हालांकि उसको शुरू नहीं हुए थे अभी, but I was the girl जो मैं बताती थी कि बेटा ये होगा तुम्हारे साथ, घबराना नहीं है, ये होगा. I mean, I think I was the mom of everybody, and there were girls in my class जिनको periods आते थे और मुझे नहीं आते थे, yet I was the one instructing them. For some odd reason, God's permutation, I was the leadership figure even in that scenario. एक कॉन्सेप्ट जो मुझे बताया गया था जो कि गलत था, वो ये था कि जब पीरियड शुरू हो जाए तो आप बड़े हो जाते हैं, ठीक है, आप बड़े हो जाते हैं. तो मुझे वो बात कंफ्यूज करती थी. तो एक दिन आई केम बैक होम फ्रॉम स्कूल और माय माय रेड लाइफ हैड स्टार्टेड. So the next day, I started talking to boys very openly, sitting in my lounge. I knew somebody, so I picked up the phone and I'm talking to him. And my family took a very strong, reaction to that. They were like, Tanzila, you don't do that. That's very inappropriate. And I was like, "मैं तो बड़ी नहीं हो गया, I can do that." And then I started watching Indian songs, and we weren't really allowed to watch Indian songs on television. And I started doing that very openly. And I think that was when I got my first slap. And I want to associate that slap with starting of the period. Because the concept of bade ho jana was ingrained in my head. And then the next 2 days, I was told कि छोटी बच्चियां perfume नहीं लगाती. So 2 days ago, मैं बड़ी हो गई थी. बीच में the slap happened, and then 2 years later, छोटी बच्चियां perfume नहीं लगाती.
Equivocal, yeah.
So
It's so
I really
confusing.
yeah, I mean, I want to go back and hug that 12-year-old guy. कि easy है, क्या करूँ उसके साथ? So this has been my story for a girl जिसको पता था. We say ना कि उसको पता नहीं था, उसको सब पता था. Yet I had to go through this. So this was my story.
Great. I think there's time for one more question, and it's a burning question because I just want to know, COVID-19 happened, and the world changed completely. A lot of you did a lot of your work post-COVID, post-pandemic, and obviously the need was there much more at that point as well, because purported rise in gender-based violence, domestic violence, more need for girls and women, lesser access to information and health services, family planning, contraception. This work that we do is already so difficult. Sometimes, when we're at our hung, we're, talking to the programming team. I'm like, we literally, it's like a ship that you're building in a desert and then waiting for the water to come so that the ship can sail. But, right now it's a complete desert. There's really no, every day you come across these cases, these examples. We're falling on the gender parity index. It's sometimes the work seems very overwhelming and almost impossible. And then COVID, the pandemic happened, it just made everything exponentially more difficult. I don't know what my question really is, but I think that what I really want to know is how to kind of take in this challenge and how to kind of go towards, setting our programs such that we are able to work and to access these communities. As a communications person, it's really difficult for me to even go to a school and get a testimonial from a girl talking about menstruation, because I mean, it was only during the time when, we used to go into the field openly, aram say, now the girls are somehow they're working, they're either online or they're not going to school. So it's really made work much more difficult. So how do we look at this challenge as far as menstruation is concerned? How do we work to overcoming it? How can we tweak our programs? What can civil society organizations do? And how do we go about amplifying young people's voices so that we incorporate them in the programs that we design? So I think, Aisha, if we can get you, because you're mostly in the communities and you're, direct access to them. So
it's actually a very difficult and broad question. And when you were asking this question, I also started reflecting. We know that pandemic there's been so much research, global, not Pakistan specific. That's unfortunate that we don't have enough data, within challenges women face in Pakistan. But there's been a lot of global data that has shown us that pandemic has already created more challenges for women, or maybe widened that gender gap, and um, it could worsen. We saw a rise in domestic violence cases because of all the lockdown and because of the income loss. So and in fact, we talked about how a pad is not a necessity. So if there are more, it is, sorry, not is not considered a necessity. So when there were lockdowns, it did impact women's access to menstrual products, and we don't know what the future holds, right? Because the pandemic is still not over. um, I do think that so we're talking about accessing communities through technology, which might not be viable for every community. But I think one approach that we have been using is identifying people from within communities who have access to technology, right? Some people have that. Some people are, already leaders within their communities. And I think Sabah was also talking about some community champions. We are also moving towards it. We're using technology to inform and educate and empower people who have access to technology and are still connected with the communities, so that if we cannot go, they can go. So what we're doing is we are giving the information, we're educating young people especially, right? We're doing these gender dialogues where we create virtual safe spaces where people, especially young people, come together, reflect and talk about gender-based violence, learn about gender-based violence, so that they can go back into their communities and then educate their communities. So that's one strategy that we have been using, and I'm curious to learn more from Tanzila and Sabah, because I know that they've been doing some really great work during pandemic.
So these virtual circles have worked, you're saying, like, having circles online and people connecting, and then them being a touch point for, a broader audience.
Yeah, so when it comes to schools, I remember during the pandemic when we were reaching out to them, they were just they were so unhappy because उनके पास तो इस वक्त normal math English पढ़ाने के लिए मुश्किल पड़ गई थी. तो ये reproductive health या menstrual knowledge तो उनको कोई interest ही नहीं था. It was so difficult to convince them. And everyone, the UN agencies, the global femtech movement was all about periods don't stop for pandemics, but literally our movements were stalled entirely. It was so demotivating. And that is when community, or let's say people who have been struggling in this particular domain for a very long time, came together. Like that's when I would say the most partnerships happen. I remember in early 2021 I started working with Tanzila. We started doing all of this advocacy ke iske upar abhi bhi kaam karna hai. We still need to work on this. That's the first time we started a podcast. Tanzila was the host for our the first podcast that we had on disability and menstruation. We started speaking about how COVID has added another layer of difficulty and challenge to the needs of people with disabilities. We started talking about it was literally for us more research and more exploration and more understanding and digging deep into the problem. So a lot of times, I think we just introspected. We were luxurious enough to have the time to kind of reflect upon our own journey and then see ab kya karna hai, ab is nayi dunya ke andar, how do we get our work across to more people. So I would say that it was difficult, but it was also for many of us, we've grown during this time. Our work has really, it's set new precedents during this time as well.
That's very inspiring. Very, very inspiring. Tanzila, anything to add there?
I completely resonate with what Aisha is saying and what Sabha is saying. And just to add on to what both of my fellows are saying is that when the entire pandemic started because of coronavirus, there was a new conversation around hygiene and a new conversation around the priority of it. Usually we don't put a lot of priority to hygiene. We say health, food, makeup, cosmetics, clothes. Hygiene, we never really talk about. But everybody was talking about hygiene. There were a lot of new actors in the arena, from celebrities to schools. We had to wash our hands, we had to use the sanitizer. So I played a little part over here and I pushed the agenda of menstrual health care with hygiene. And that helped me get entry into a lot of spaces in terms of an entrepreneur that when you talk about hygiene, it's essential to talk about menstrual hygiene as well. And I think the pandemic sort of opened the door to this conversation that was not happening initially, because it became a matter of life and death. So you see what we have to do to get the attention of the world. So I think as an entrepreneur, it's very important to identify opportunities for the community. And I think for me, this was an opportunity of the conversation. And when we pushed this idea, we did get a lot of attention. We got some grants. We did some new projects around hygiene as well. And that's exactly where the menstrual leadership module came into being, because it talks about menstrual hygiene from a leadership point of view on a massive level and on a micro level as well. So I think uh, apart from all the challenges was one tiny beam of light, but the challenges are completely there. I completely agree with what Sabah and Aisha are mentioning, that our work, our pressures doubled. For example, we girly things हम लोग deliver करते हैं menstrual health care products. Numerically तो हमारे numbers बहुत बढ़ जाने चाहिए थे. We did get a lot of orders. We did expand across Pakistan. We developed a network. लेकिन the challenge was कि हमारी deliveries late हो रही थी, because the e-commerce influx was so high, and everybody wanted the e-commerce method for their own needs as well. कि menstrual health care products late पहुंचना शुरू हो गई, so we had to call back our delivery partners and push कि नहीं, these are not clothes, these are not cosmetics, you have to deliver them as fast as you can. Okay? So these were tiny challenges that we had to face.
Great. It's so, I mean, there's still so many questions I have, and I hope I get an opportunity to connect with you all again. Aisha, you've taught us so much about accessing communities. Sabah, technology is key. Tanzila, never give up, and your entrepreneurial spirit is just amazing. So I just, and also looking at it, looking at the stigma within and trying to first work against that, then taking a step towards trying to tackle it completely. I just want each of you to leave us with just one thing, for our audience, for a young person listening in. What is your closing remark? What is that message that you want to pass on? What is that torch saying that you're handing over to her as an activist, as an advocate for menstrual health and hygiene, and as Tanzila said, leadership in this domain? Who would like to go first?
Since my mic is on already. So Anna, actually, but just to sum it up quickly, I would like to say that every menstruator should believe that menstruation is normal, and I would like to pass the torch saying that you are your own leader first, and this entire body, it's not just a body, it's a universe. And I think this womb that we have itself is so little explored until unless there's not a child inside, so you don't have to put a child inside to appreciate the womb. It's there for a purpose. It's beautiful. It gives you so many different feelings, butterflies, cramps, everything is beautiful. So I think I would like to pass the torch saying that this is your journey. It's up to you. Make it beautiful, and it will be beautiful. So this is going to be my torch passing to Sabah.
I want to speak to women innovators, and I really want to explore the fact that we've been having periods since the beginning of humankind. Like, periods have never stopped. And during all of this time, like hundreds and hundreds of years, the innovation around reproductive health has been barely there. Like, sanitary napkins ke beyond, ek हमारे पास tampons हैं, एक हमारे पास cups आए हैं. If, let's say, something that happens to so many women around the world on a monthly basis, why isn't this area being innovated? And why isn't technology or new ways to solve problems with this particular process being addressed? And I want to talk specifically about cramps or pain around it. And I don't think we got a chance to talk about it, but menstrual cramps happen to such a large population, And beyond, let's say, एक pill खा लो, कोई painkiller खा लो, या water bottle लगा लो, इसके अलावा there's no innovation around it. It's such a common problem and there's nobody thinking about it. So I feel like nobody's going to solve these problems unless we start solving these problems, and there are enough people who would like you to solve this problem as well. So there are enough buyers for your product, there are enough people interested in your innovation. The world is waiting for menstrual innovations, but are people innovating? That's the thing that I feel like it's a question I want to leave for the rest of the world to kind of think about.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sabah, I mean, it's like, and sometimes it's painkillers don't work. It's, I get a backache 3 days before, and no amount of painkillers and no amount of yoga and nothing works, like exercise, whatever you do. It's just that backache is really persistent. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're right. Hello, women scientists of the world, or like feminist scientists of the world, wake up and respond to 50% of the population on Earth. Please, yeah, I mean, menstrual innovation never really paid much attention to that, but yeah, definitely. Aisha, coming to you.
So my closing thought would be, although there's so many thoughts right now in my head, but the one thought would be, I think it's injustice that a normal process like menstruation was somehow became a taboo. I think now we have to undo it, and the only way to do this is information, talking about it. And those of us who have shown courage, who can find courage, should start speaking about it in our own ways, right? I know, like, maybe it it is also a little daunting, all of a sudden आप बात करना start कर दें जब आप इतना used to नहीं हो. But I think slowly some of us who have shown courage would need to start speaking about it, addressing it like a normal process, so that others, who don't have the courage could maybe pick up some courage, and then maybe one day, young boys and men around us will also start treating it as a normal process, just like breathing, eating. So yeah, just talk about it.
Yeah, and especially boys. I mean, it's not about just teaching girls about menstruation at the right time. It's about teaching your male child to, also understand the changes a female body goes through. And yeah, definitely, I think courage can be contagious there, and start having these conversations, opening them up, and yeah, like pass on the torch. And it's been amazing. Thank you so very much. I learned so much today. Tanzila, Sabah, Aisha, this is not the last conversation we're having on this, and we're totally going to reconnect. I'm going to totally plague you for many more discussions on this. COVID-19, I don't know when it's going, what's happening, but the impact it's made on girls and women the world over is massive, and especially GBV prevention is something that we really need to focus on. I bleed, therefore I am. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, British Council. Thank you to the team working behind the scenes, Amne, Vicky, thanks a lot. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Amna and Amne, for hosting us. It was lovely being part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed this. And Aisha ne bahut achhi baat ki, this is going to be my takeaway, that is to reflect. So I'm going to be doing a lot of reflection. So thank you, everyone, for sharing so much. Thank you.
I have to say, this is the best panel discussion or live session or whatever I've been to, because all such amazing women doing amazing work, including you, Amna, Amni, and Vicky. So I know Sabah and Tanzila are doing great work, but it was also great to connect with you, Amna, and Vicky. I already know Amni. So